citizen is a standard of living. So cost of living, what is the price of things, and are you able to afford them? How often does a family say go without food? Those are the things for the citizen, and this is what the data is saying. 7 key points on the economic side. You already all know the shilling has tanked. It's doing very badly against the US dollar, but also regionally. You also know that the public finances are not being run well, evidenced by a big and growing budget deficit, the result of which the economy is not growing. And when you will see the data comparing quarter for quarter, so what was happening in the first and second quarter of this calendar year vis-a-vis what happened in the years prior to this one, and ultimately what is going on for the small and the micro businesses, and they themselves are very, very adversely affected. Let's start with the exchange rate. At this administration, the shilling was 120, traded at 120 shillings to $1. Right now, 150 shillings, that's the official, 150 shillings to $1. But as you know, really, when you go to your own banks, they are selling it to you higher than the official stated price by the central bank of 150. What is the effect of it? 25% more cost. So whatever it is that you buy, and you buy from outside Kenya, whether it is the clothes you're wearing, whether it is food, and I don't want to get you started on fuel. We'll talk about that in a moment. Everything is 25% higher. The regime will say, but this is a global problem. Well, the work of management is not to explain problems, is to solve problems. The point of having a government is not so that they can explain to the citizen what the problem is. The point is for government to be able to solve those problems. So, a tanked shilling, and it is affecting all the sectors in the economy. How are we doing regionally? Against Tanzania shilling, 20% less. Against Uganda shilling, 23% less. So not only are we doing bad globally, even within the region, our currency is doing badly. On public finance, the key point is a regime that refuses to acknowledge the reality of its own experts and those they are relying on, including IMF, which is this: we are in a circumstance of debt distress. Debt distress for the nation is the same as for you as a person. If you have a loan and you have to go and borrow another loan in order to pay the first one, that is debt distress. And that's exactly what is happening to the country. Every week when government is borrowing, it is using some of the money it borrows to pay last year's and the year before treasury bills and bonds. Why is it debt distress? Because the debt now is more expensive than it was last year, so the problem is only getting worse. The increase and proposed increases for next year into the medium term of the budget, it should be another issue of concern, because that is what is giving rise to the very severe taxation and massive borrowing. Budget deficit maintained at beyond 700 billion. What is the effect of it? That then the government has to borrow massively in the domestic market, and that is what is causing the interest on your loan, if you are lucky to get a loan, which is not, most of us are not that lucky. That's why you are having to pay very high interest rates because of the massive borrowing that government is undertaking. If you compare quarter to quarter, what has happened in the first 2 quarters, or in the when KK has been in the driving seat, it is that growth has flatlined. So if you compare, quarter 2, for example, of this calendar year with quarter 2 from last year, so that you are comparing apples and apples, what you will find is that it is stagnant. Compare that, say, to 2 years ago, when growth was 11% in the second quarter. So in that second quarter of 2021, that was post-COVID recovery. Obviously, when the economy has flatlined, it is fiction to think that you can get more taxes, as the administration is claiming. To the cost of living. And I want to remind you, these numbers were before the disaster of yesterday or the night before. So the numbers you are seeing here of the trajectory of inflation was before the dramatic and really uncaring increase in fuel prices that happened as we woke up yesterday. But this is the direction that inflation has been going. But the point is that the key drivers of inflation have been mismanaged. Because what are they? Kenyan inflation is primarily food, fuel. And those two key drivers has been mismanaged. On the fuel side, the G2G deal turned out to be hot air, perhaps to use the language of the day. It did not bring the benefits that were touted. And part of the increased costs of that transaction, we suspect, what was informing yesterday's increases in pump prices. So, the principal reason why inflation came down in August and July, it is food inflation. Basically, it rained. And of course, Kenya Kwanza should not claim to be the ones who caused it to rain. Yeah. So it rained. If you look in the detailed data, what you will see is the price of vegetables have come down. So cabbage and so on, sukuma wiki, those prices have come down, and that is why in the month on month, and again we want you to be careful, we are talking on month, August was slightly better. But you must look at what has happened in the full year. And I'll come back to this slide in a moment. This is what has happened in the full year. That all food prices, with the exception of 1 liter of cooking oil, all of them are up with percentages between 6 and as high as 61%. And pay attention to this, what is this 61%? Is electricity that you use. So when you are seeing people saying, how come if I had 1,000 shillings and I bought tokens for the house, last year I was getting 62 tokens. This year, or units, this year I'm only getting 29. That's what that is about. Because the price of electricity has gone up 61% if you're a small consumer, and 31, here we go, and 42% if you are a larger consumer. Now, I spoke to you briefly about what is happening because of this massive borrowing. In the language of bankers and economists, we talk about the spread, the difference between, if you have a few shillings and you put in a bank, if they pay you interest for your deposit and how much they are lending. What you will see is that spread between what they pay Kenyans for their money and what they are lending, mainly government, that spread is going up. And that's, so at the beginning of the year, it was 8.9, now it is 9.8%. Why? Because government is driving up that spread in order to attract money to itself. And that's the point we are saying, of massive borrowing. And this is what then, in that language, they talk about crowding out. So government is pushing out the private sector and taking most of the money to itself. And you can see the trajectory of the curve that, treasury bills and bonds are competing with the private sector, and most of the money is going to them because they are paying much higher rates. Now, on the economic, on the micro and small businesses, which is where the bulk of Kenyans are, what is happening there? In summary, more of us are hawking than we were a year ago. We are borrowing for things that we were not borrowing for last year, primarily education, and I'll show you the data in a moment, and we are defaulting more than we were doing last year. We are closing businesses more. Why? Because of lack of working capital. And roughly 60% of those who end up closing is after they have made tremendous effort to get it. So this is the data that I'm talking about. First, people are having to do more than one thing. So maybe you are selling bananas, but you are also trying to sell something else, sweets or something like this. And that's the first line there. You are seeing those of us trying to do more than one thing has gone up to 19%. Where do we work from? As I said already, welcome, Your Excellency, Stephen Kalonzo. As I said already, we could be working in a cluster, we could be working in a market stall or a Juakali shed, we could be working online or from our homes, or we are hawking. We have no fixed abode and we're going from street to street. And that's what I want you to notice, that those of us who are working from a fixed place, whether a Juakali shed or something like this, that number has gone down to 21%. Those working online and from homes, that also has gone down. And most importantly then, those who are hawking has gone up. Now, the percentage who are borrowing has remained roughly the same at around 55–56%. Yeah, but remember, small businesses themselves, like your neighborhood kiosk, sometimes they extend you credit. You get milk and bread to pay at the end of the week. Ukipata kibarua. The percentage that are able to do that is declining, and that's what the next number is showing you, that those micro and small businesses that have been unable to entertain their customers that way, that proportion is going up to 33%. Those who get goods on credit from their supplier of bananas, that proportion is going down by 6 percentage points. Meaning, micro and small businesses are facing an even tougher and tougher time. But I want you to take notice of the following. Why do they borrow? The micro and small businesses. They borrow, the top 5 reasons is obviously 1, to restock. But we also borrow for household expenses, for food at home and so on. And the proportion of us borrowing for household expenses has gone up dramatically by 7%. This is what I pointed to you earlier. Last year we were not borrowing for education. Now 23% of us are borrowing for education. And those borrowing then to expand our business and is declining. This data, and the Fourth Estate, you reported on it a few days ago. How many of the micros and small businesses are defaulting? Defaulting meaning you are paying late, or you are paying less than you should pay, or not at all. That proportion has gone up dramatically to 61%, having risen by nearly 18% during the year that Kenya Kwanza, during the year that this regime has been in power. I want to transition to Dr. Karogo to take you through part of the social pillar and then bring up the rest of my colleagues. I thank you very much.
Thank you.